Well, it was a long time ago, and it was an extraordinary event for me. I had never done anything like that. I had never worked one-to-one with a printer. I had worked in at experimental workshop in San Francisco over the years, but to be invited to have the opportunity to work with Julia was an exceptional opportunity, and it was just an amazing experience. I learned so much from working with her, and I was very grateful that I was invited to do that. It was at the beginning of the current print program that is here at Sitka. And I don't remember, it was maybe the second or third year on when I was invited, and it was just getting underway. At that point, or prior to that, there wasn't even a printing press here at Sitka. So I felt extremely fortunate and honored to have been asked to come and work with Julia. So indeed, it has had a lasting impression, and I'm back again now, how many years later? 14 years later to work with Julia again. And it's been another extraordinary week of working with her, being here at Sitka for the week. So I'm ever grateful, and I find it inspiring and reassuring to be able to work with someone so knowledgeable, and it sparks my interest even deeper in the medium of etching and aquatint and the various processes that go into making a fine print. I was a resident here, I think, in 1991, and the then current director was Randall Cook, and he and members of the board were having discussions about the future of Sitka and making plans for different programs. It was at that time extremely small. There was room for 2 artists in residence, and there was the Boyden Studio and the Morley House were the only 2 buildings here. There was a small little separate building to the east of the Boyden Studio. And through the course of conversations that I had with Randall and with Dale Smith, who was the chair of the board, kind of focused around what could be established and built over a period of years that would bring artists or writers to Sitka to do various projects, specific projects. And I suggested that they consider printmaking, in that they could invite artists of different working in different media to come and make prints, and Sitka could benefit from having editions printed and use it as a fundraising source, and also gain a measure of recognition on a national level in terms of attracting artists for a specific purpose, that of making prints. So over the course of, I don't know, the next 10 years or so, they expanded the buildings, and they added the current print studio, which is named after Dale Smith, and started inviting Julia to come and work with different artists. And indeed, they made this wonderful program happen. And it's been a very popular and very dynamic way of allowing a broader representation of Sitka. And I think it has absolutely fed into the popularity and to the unique quality that Sitka brings to residency programs. So that's how the printmaking program started, and it's now being funded, as everyone knows, by Jordan Schnitzer, and thank goodness for his patronage, and thank goodness that Julia is the central element that makes it happen. Well, I am a printmaker, but primarily, and I taught printmaking for years before I retired from teaching. Um, and you know, it has certainly broadened my knowledge of particular techniques through Julia's expertise and through her generosity of sharing all of that information with me. So I'm ever grateful for having worked with her for many reasons, but that's a major reason. But it also has reinforced my ability to use prints in other ways that I wouldn't necessarily have considered had I not had the opportunity to work in this facility and to separate myself from my teaching in California. So it's been very valuable to me on many levels and in many different measures of participation in various media, painting, and I've done some sculptural work, and all of it centers around drawing. And so that has been the common theme throughout most of my work over my lifetime. So print has been a very important element of that drawing aspect of my work. I'm making an etching. As it turns out today, as of today, it's a two-plate etching, and it was inspired by a poem. Frank Boyden called me several months ago and said that he wanted to read me a poem, and he read me this amazing poem, and that was the extent of the conversation. It was not a long conversation about anything. He just announced that he wanted me to hear this poem, and he read it to me, and I was very taken by the poem. And the poem was written by Tom Crawford, who had been a resident here years ago. I don't know exactly when, but he had been a resident here as a writer. And the poem was from a new publication called What a Waste of Stars. It's a new publication of his poetry. And it's the first poem in the book, called How to Draw a Better Bird. And unknown to Frank when he called was the fact that I was working on a series of pen and ink drawings of birds. It was a calligraphy project, and I was right in the throes of it, right in the middle of it, and he read me this amazing poem about the demise of a species of bird. And I didn't tell him that I was working on a series of drawings, but that spurred me on to not only finish that group of drawings, but to make yet another group of drawings that incorporated this poem or elements of the poem. And so over the last several months, I've been working on a series of drawings and prints and combination of drawing and print that were inspired and focused on this very poem. So I looked at all of those drawings when I was invited to come in and work with Julia again for this anniversary portfolio, and decided that that would be a very appropriate subject and a very appropriate image considering the history and the mission of Sitka. And so I brought those drawings, and with Julia we discussed how we could turn that into an appropriate image for this portfolio. So that's what I'm working on and how it came about. The actual image is the drawing is made from the skull of a bird, and then it's incorporated into a landscape, and the poem is also printed on top of the etching of the bird skull. As I said earlier, it's an extraordinary program, and I, along with everyone that I know who has benefited from participation in this program, have benefited enormously from his generosity. And I suppose the most important thing that I could say to him is, I can speak to how meaningful it has been to me, and I'm sure others who have participated in the program would feel the same way. It's it is a gift in so many ways. It's a gift to allow an artist to come into a different environment and not worry about time, space, materials, knowledge of a particular medium, having Julia here to work with, and to experiment. And I think those are the elements that every artist would dream of having. And so I think it's important that Jordan Schnitzer understands the value of what he is so generously offered to so many people, and it's also an extraordinary example of how a program like this can benefit an institution by establishing a level of reverence for the institution and broadening the scope of the institution and promoting the popularity of and knowledge about the various communities that would offer something like this. It's a great example that others could aspire to.